Now loading this month's Leadership Live, where we dive in deep with today's top MedTech leaders, allowing you the chance to learn from the best. Leadership Live starts now.
Hello, FloodGate family. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Leadership Live. And on this edition, I am ecstatic to hear from Stuart Simpson, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Think Surgical, who's been making incredible waves in the surgical robotics space and orthopedics. But I'm not going to steal your thunder, Stuart. And I've been lucky enough to get to know you and meet a couple times, but the audience doesn't. So tell us a little bit about yourself and Think Surgical.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation to be on your podcast today. It's a real pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation with you. I've been the CEO of Think Surgical now for 3 years, and it's the most amazing company. And it's kind of my dream job. I couldn't honestly have ever believed that I would have an opportunity like this, and I'm loving it. Think Surgical are a orthopedic robotics company, a pure play robot company. But we'll probably get into a little bit of that later on. In terms of background, I grew up in Scotland, and like generations of Scots people before me, that means I've got a bit of an underdog mentality. You know, we grow up knowing that the odds are stacked against us, and we grow up with this sort of romanticism about toppling the giant every now and again, particularly in sporting events. And occasionally we do it, but often we don't. But that kind of upbringing gives you an incredible sense of optimism. And I find that that's something that has sort of carried through my career, the belief in the ability to do something, even if it seems like a big challenge. Growing up, I played a lot of sports. I was incredibly competitive. I hate to lose. And career-wise, I spent most of my career at Stryker, and it's a wonderful company. They gave me the opportunity to take on multiple assignments all around the world, each one of those assignments being slightly bigger or in scope or more challenging in nature. And that's really where a lot of my thoughts around leadership were learned through.
Yeah,
often lessons learned, right? Mistakes made. And it's kind of a destination career where I just kept getting a little bit more, a little bit bigger. And eventually that led me to become the president of Stryker's orthopedics business, which was just a wonderful opportunity. So that brings me to where I am today. I'm married with 2 wonderful daughters and a wife who I admire, respect. And, you know, she's a Scots person as well. And she keeps me absolutely grounded. or she tries to.
Yeah, exactly. That's an important attribute. And I've had the luxury of working with several former Stryker executives and learning by proxy some of that leadership and learning, et cetera. So I think we definitely have some mutual friends on that aspect. Speaking about what does make a great leader and the learning of great leaders in this unique space of MedTech.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What are those attributes? What did you learn? What have you seen?
So there's probably like 4 or 5 key themes that I go back to time and time again. The first one is understanding how to manage and nurture talent and culture. And you can't separate those 2 things. You know, good talent, bad culture is not a recipe for success. Great culture, poor talent, not a recipe for success. You have to get both of those things right. And you have to learn through your experiences how to nurture both of those. And it's not easy. There's a lot of finesse involved, particularly when it comes to culture. The second thing that I find myself focused on a lot in conversations is delegation, learning how to effectively delegate, knowing who to delegate to, how to delegate effectively, and when to delegate. And it's probably one of the hardest lessons I've learned in my career. And you know, there was a point mid-career where I actually brought some consultants in to work with me and one of my leadership teams on how to be a better delegator. And delegation is actually a 2-way sport. It's not a one direction sport. So I learned a lot through that, and I continue to work on that. And to be honest, it's probably the thing that I continue to talk to people I'm mentoring about, whether they're late in their career, mid-career, or early career, how and what delegation is all about.
Yeah.
The third thing a leader needs to do is connect the dots. And as you get higher in an organization, have a broader purview, you recognize that there's a lot of great work happening in isolation, and connecting those dots is where you unleash a lot of potential, and connecting the total effort back to a vision, a purpose, a mission is powerful. The next thing I spend a lot of time on is thinking about resource allocation and how to allocate resources. Everybody wants more all the time. Learning how to say no or no more is one of the hardest things to learn as a leader. And I don't know that I've ever totally cracked that code, but I continue to work on it. And the last thing is, as a leader, you have to set a high level of ambition. You have to create excitement and energy and momentum, but you also have to know when to back off. There is a point when you can push people and teams too far. There's no real recipe for that. It really comes from experience, intuition, and situational awareness. And, you know, a couple of times in the last 3 years here at Think, I've had to really back off a project. And when I did that, the team breathed a sigh of relief, regrouped. They respected me for knowing that I couldn't push them any further, and they became even more passionate and committed to what we're working on. So I think those are the sort of 5 key themes, Joe, that I keep coming back to time and time again.
Yeah, no, that's some really, really solid points. They kind of do, in my aspect, tie a lot together, right? If you have that culture, and the culture with the right people in place, not poor talent, but good talent and the right culture, and learning to delegate effectively, and which a lot of times with great people, they want to be empowered, right? Yeah. And delegation is the definition of empowerment. That's a two-way street, as you said, or a two-person game, you know. I think it is really well said. And, you know, and really doing that and knowing to create the energy and the push, but when to step back, you know, is push as hard as you can, but don't redline it, you know, because having that balance is I've already called unsustainable growth. You know, there's that sustain, you know, that right level of growth, and there's that unsustainable. When you push that unsustainable, how long? So some really good points in there.
Yeah, and if you continue to push past that point, I think you lose people and you break things, and ultimately you erode the culture. So I mean, it's actually something that I'm very conscious of. But if you back off too soon and too often, you get low performance.
Right. You're not setting the expectation high enough, and a lot of times great people like to rise to higher expectations, right? So it is. You know, it's getting that recipe just right. It's trial and error sometimes. But we mentioned a couple of these, delegation, you know, getting that balance. But what are our couple lessons that you might have learned the hard way along the way, or seen other people do that you might be able to impart some wisdom on people that are in leadership right now?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about personal experience and the mistakes that I've made along the way. I think leadership is a personal journey. And if you don't reflect on your personal experiences, you're not learning, you're not growing. So first of all, we all have blind spots. Whether we acknowledge it or not, we do. We have blind spots. We have blind spots for people particularly. And I think about a situation where I had a blind spot for someone who was phenomenal and did some of the best work I've ever seen in my career when he worked for me, but I wasn't really listening to the feedback I was getting about how he was conducting himself in the broader organization. And I continued to protect him and insulate him from that. And then I got promoted and moved to another continent. And guess what? He was left exposed. And he didn't stay with the company much longer after that. So I learned a lot from that experience. I also have learned that personality is not a proxy for capability or talent. We all know those people that we really enjoy being around, and you know, everyone loves X. And I can think of one guy in particular that everyone at Stryker loved, and I ended up loving him the way everybody else did. I put him into a big role, and then I realized that he lacked some critical capabilities for that role. And I started giving him some feedback. And because he'd been told by everyone that he was wonderful over such a long period of time, he wasn't open to the feedback. And it became a situation where people around me were like, well, it's just a personality clash between the two. So he moved on to another division and ran into the same challenges. And, ultimately he came back and said, look, if only I'd listened, I would have known what I'm really good at. And by the way, I'm better at that than even you tell me. And I would have accepted the things that I'm not so good at. And I wouldn't have taken that detour that didn't take me forward. Thirdly, it's your team. Make your own picks. I was pushed into making an appointment early in my career that didn't work out. I should never have done it, and I swore that I would never do it again. And then 15 years later, guess what? I was kind of pushed, almost bullied into picking someone. Even as a pretty senior person at Stryker, I was put in that situation, and I acquiesced. I took the person, and it just didn't work out. So I guess, shame on me for not learning from the first time and never doing it again.
Right.
I made the mistake again. I will never make that mistake again.
Yeah, no, I think that's three great points. I mean, the first two, it's, you have someone that you work well against, but if you're getting feedback from somebody else, you kind of owe it to that person to deliver that, not insulate them, give them that feedback early, right? And kind of similar to that person that just had that really likable personality. If someone would have kind of identified their blind spots, as you said earlier, right? That earlier, and given them some of that feedback, might have had some humility early, or focus their energy on what they're really good at, and then every team's got its own dynamic. Every leader's got its own dynamic, and knowing that you've got an opportunity to pick your team, that it works together and you create that cohesiveness, don't underestimate it. Right. And if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. I guess.
And more than anything, nobody has a 100% batting average on talent.
No.
Own your mistakes, and when you've made a mistake, act quickly, because everybody else knows you made a mistake, and you're hurting the team if you try and struggle through that mistake. So just own your own mistakes and act quickly.
No, I'd agree. And usually those mistakes, that person that isn't fitting feels the exact same way, so.
Yeah. And I had another one of them just 18 months ago, and but thankfully I recognized it and I moved quickly.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And so speaking about people that might be underperformers in the wrong place, you have the other side, right? Which is the high performers. So people that are well-placed, really accelerating and developing. That 20% usually gives you that 80% result. So how do you develop high performers?
I've got 3 rules when it comes to this, and they're very simple. 1, create challenging projects for them. Something that's outside of their day job. So they have their day-to-day responsibilities. Give them something big, high profile, meaningful to work on, and watch how they apply themselves. It's not just what they do, it's how they do it. Do they see it as an opportunity? Do they grasp it? Do they make the most of the opportunity? Secondly, be very active in their careers. And there's 2 things here. You have to make sure that those high potential people are moving forward in the organization and not getting stuck behind managers who want to hold on to them. You also don't want to over promote high performers, right? I've seen too many managers see somebody who's good at something, they want to promote them immediately and repeatedly. And I've seen those candidates become overextended and fail. And, they're your most precious resource, that high potential talent that fits well with the culture of your company. So you have a responsibility to make sure that you're overseeing to some extent their career, and then rotate them. Don't let them get stuck in one role too long. Don't let them move too quickly, but give them long enough to settle into a new business, a new geography, a new functional responsibility, and see how they grow when they maybe don't have the domain knowledge and expertise that they had in their past job. How are they applying their leadership skills to a new situation where they're not the expert anymore? That for me, that's what worked for me. And I'm blessed that I had an opportunity to work for one of the companies that's great at this.
Well, I think that environment, when you're placed in those environments where you're no longer the subject matter expert, it's a great way to strengthen that delegation skill because you really don't know what to do. You need other people, and it strengthens that leadership ability because you're forced to do it, right? You're no longer the easy button.
Yeah, and it brings in some humility. You suddenly realize you're in this situation. You're not as good as you thought you were.
Yeah, right.
You got to figure it out, and that's the growth journey.
Yeah, no, and I also like it's giving them a challenge outside of their responsibility. I think one of our mutual friends, Mike Mogul, says, "Great people love a great challenge." And I remember that and think about it all the time. How do you challenge them in different ways? And what I hadn't heard is be cognizant of those, that the great managers want to hold on to them because they love them, right? Of course, they want them on their team, but and have to force that issue because it might not happen on its own. Because why would you want to get rid of your best player, right? And you got to kind of force that issue as a leader. So I think that's really well said.
Exactly. And it's not. If you allow them to get stuck, they'll leave and they'll go and take their magic somewhere else.
Yeah. I'm going to continue to ask Stuart some questions, but if you guys have some questions for Stuart, comment below, and we're going to pull those into the end of this comment. So please just comment below. We'll put some. We'll bring those up at the end and give you a chance to pick his brain directly here. So one that's near and dear to my heart is finding these high performers, right, and bringing them onto the organization. So how do you find what's worked, and how do you evaluate new talent before you bring them on? What would you suggest?
So I'm always recruiting. I'm always in recruiting mode, whether I've got vacancies or don't have vacancies. I'm always networking inside an organization if you're part of a big organization, or outside in the industry and marketplace at large if you're in a smaller company as I am just now. And I often put people on a list of people I would love to work with if and when the right opportunity comes up. And that's just, you got to fill your pipeline like a great salesperson. You don't want to wait until you've got an opening before you think, how am I going to fill it, right? So that's number one. Number two, I have very strong relationships with some professional recruiters. And it goes beyond a transactional relationship. They're trusted partners. When I need to talk to them about leadership stuff, or I need to talk to them about industry stuff, or I need to talk to them about people I've met, I pick up the phone. And likewise, when they wanted a reference or they want some insight from me, they call me. So we've got this sort of ongoing relationship. And that for me is invaluable. I had my leadership team meet recently, and I wanted a particular type of external speaker to come and stimulate a conversation. I picked up the phone to those two recruiters that I have those relationships with and said, hey, can you think of someone that fits this profile? So I think it's not a public service announcement for what you do, but it kind of is.
I appreciate that.
When you do go into the market, you need to have very specific specs. I have seen too many people, even at a high level, delegate the job description and spec that you're recruiting to the recruiter or to the HR department. Only you as the business leader know the specifics of the role, the specifics of the environment, the specifics of the culture, the business challenges that you're facing. Only you know the sort of mix of experience, of skills, of personal traits that you're looking for. And every job description should be so unrecognizably different from the last, even if there's the same title you're recruiting for. So I invest a lot of time in developing those specs so that when the recruiters that I work with go out into the market, they know exactly what they're looking for. Plus, they've known me for a long time, so they know personality-wise what will fit with me. So that's important. And the last thing is, when you're selecting talent or assessing talent, we all have unconscious bias. And it's very important to get peer involvement in talent assessment when you're thinking about recruiting, developing, or promoting anyone.
Yeah, that's some great suggestions. One of the things you bring up that I talk to hiring managers all the time about is, 30% of your recruiting success starts before you even begin recruiting. One is creating that brand in the market. You called it always be recruiting, right? You're creating your brand, you're making connections. There, people are telling everyone, "Hey, man, that Stuart guy. It seems like a good company. He's a good, person." And they're telling, you're creating that brand in the marketplace. And then second is really stepping back and going, "What do I really need?" Yeah. Not just the top line fundamentals, but really thinking, who are the best people that I've ever worked with this? What were they like? Where'd they come from? Where's the ones where it challenges? Why didn't they fit? And really crafting, whether it's on a black and white job description or in the head of a partner, you need to be able to articulate that effectively, and you start with that target, right? And you have good partners that you trust and have a relationship with. It works.
Yeah. I'm a very firm believer that clarity of thought comes from committing things to writing. I actually do think it is write it down on a piece of paper, type it into a document. The discipline of concisely articulating what you're looking for is the key to success.
That's a very, like Jeff Bezos, right? He has that, his classic meeting story, right? Everyone has to, when they bring it up, they pass it around and have to read it before they get to talk about it. So yeah, that makes sense.
100%.
But now there's a lot of leaders listening to this, but there's also a lot of people that are individual contributors now who want to be tapped for leaders. And so what suggestions, what tips would you give those individuals to want to be tapped for a leadership role?
First and foremost, stand out naturally. And what does that mean? It means do good work, be a great part of the culture and the team that you're working with. Be aligned with the values of the organization that you're in. I call it the brand ambassador, because we're looking for people who are not only really good at what they do, but they're a really good fit for the company and the culture that we're trying to build. Go back to my first point, both are equally important. So don't just be that person that's relentlessly pushing. Do good work, be aligned with the values, and stand out as an ambassador for the company, and be patient, because it is so much more powerful when somebody comes to you and pulls you into an opportunity than they give up because you've been pushing for an opportunity relentlessly, right? Build strong networks, and in those relationships that you build in the company and outside the company, be prepared to give more than you take. I get a lot of calls saying, "Hey, can you mentor me?" And I show up and people haven't prepared anything and they're looking for me just to tell them how they're going to be successful. If you're building those relationships, take responsibility for creating an agenda for a conversation, which is challenging and rewarding in both directions, and pay it forward. If somebody's looking for something from you, help them out, right? Yeah. So give more than you take, and that's how you build strong networks. Then you need to be very self-aware, and that's the hardest bit for early stage professionals. Tell me what you're good at, what you're not good at. Tell me what people like about you, don't like about you. However you frame the conversation, it's difficult. But if you can come to terms with who you are and become very comfortable with what you're good at and not good at, you will grow. Actively seek feedback. Look for coaches, not bosses in life. Hey coach, how come this didn't work out? That's the type of conversation you want to have. And leadership is all about influence. It's not about bossing or directing. It's about influencing. It's about coaching. So you need to be somebody who wants to be coached, and you need to be somebody who is good at coaching others.
Right. So, yeah, because if you're someone that, and I think a lot of what I heard you say of those people is, one, take the initiative, but have a we mentality, not an I mentality.
Yes.
Right. Show that you're wanting to just have success for the greater organization, to be that brand ambassador, to have the patience till it's right, be the one that always wants to help others. Because you're emulating that servant leadership mentality before you ever are a leader in that aspect, it sounds like.
Yeah. When you give somebody a big opportunity, you're doing it for a reason. If the first question out of their mouth is, "What's in it for me?"
Right. Yeah.
So, it's all about your attitude and your attitude to personal growth. That's what is infectious to people above you who are looking for standout talent.
Yeah, that's great, really good suggestions. I'm going to ask one other question to Stuart, but please comment below. We're going to pull those in here in a moment. So if you have any other questions, let us know. And Stuart, this is our fun one here that I surprised you yesterday here. So Who is your favorite superhero and why?
Yeah, this is the one that stressed me out yesterday when we were on the prep call. Probably no surprise given the first few comments that I made. I think about David in the David versus Goliath story. Someone who's brave enough to stand up and take on the giant, but not foolish. Not somebody who's just running into a buzzsaw, but brave enough and but not too foolish. Someone who's prepared to take a swing, literally in this particular story.
Yeah, right.
And I think about the people that are with me at Think Surgical, and I'm incredibly proud of the Think team because they're all taking a swing. They're all taking on the big giants in the industry, and it's fun. And I feel like the team around that I have around about me, we might just succeed, but if we don't, we're going to have a great time trying.
Well, there's a little bit of another analogy here. You have the mini robot, So is there a little analogy there too? Here,
so you saw an angle that I completely missed.
That's good. Well, guys, we're going to take in a couple other comments here. So please, if you have other comments, please put them below here. So we've got. Let's see, you got Jason. Are you more inclined to hire someone that has a high performer in a different industry or an average performer in the similar industry? So
again, it comes back to the needs of the role. If you need someone with incredible domain knowledge, then I would put that as the priority on that spec that I was talking about earlier. If that is not the case, then I would lead with, outstanding performer from any line of business anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And, when you write those specs, I don't think I've ever had a candidate achieve 100%. But what is important is not just to list all the things, but to call out the priorities. So my last spec was, I really wanted somebody that had been successful in a startup environment or two, but I wanted somebody that had the discipline and process knowledge of working in a large MedTech. And I said that the discipline and process of working in a large MedTech was more important than the startup entrepreneurial experience. So I called out the priority. And I think it depends on the job.
Yeah, I think it's a great, know what you really need, what the experience, what you have. I mean, I've seen companies have exceptional training programs in a technical environment.
Yep.
They can go outside and look for high performers, but there's some, they got to go out and figure it out themselves and they have no one to teach them. So you need a little more industry experience, right? So it varies place to place. So that's a great suggestion. I'm going to take one more question as we're kind of coming up towards a half hour here, but from Jessica, what are some of the key soft skills that enable sales reps that Think Surgical to succeed?
As somebody who was only ever average as a salesperson, you're really the wrong person. In any position, I think it's important that you dial up your listening skills, active listening skills, and it's often talked about, but it's not often done. That active listening is very, very important. That concept of being giving more than you're taking. Yeah, you're calling on a customer because you want something from them, you want their business, but if you're giving them something in the first instance, you're building a relationship, you're building trust, you're building respect. So I think that's important. And the last thing is the point I made earlier about we're looking for people that are going to push real hard, but we also need people that know when enough is enough or too much is too much. I think about a story when I was working in Australia and a customer complained to me about one of the sales managers down there. And it was because, and he was a great sales manager. He was relentless, but the customer said to me, look, Stuart, when the guy followed me into the restroom and wouldn't stop talking when I was trying to take care of business, it was enough. Just don't, please don't let him call on me anymore.
Yeah, I could see you got to be able to have that line you draw. But I think ultimately, it's that customer centric focus. You're trying to make them better, right? And to do that, you've got to understand the problem. You've got to be truly inquisitive and also have a little humility when you can't solve their problem and you've done all the uncovery to say, you know what, I'll come back when I can, and get that credibility. And here's how I can help you in the meantime.
And just be
Some good suggestions.
Just be self-aware. Most people have got more self-awareness than that particular gentleman I was talking about.
Yeah.
Be self-aware when you're getting close to crossing a line, and just back off.
Yeah. Good suggestion. Well, we're at the half hour. I do appreciate the time. It's gone really fast, Stuart. You've got tons of great advice and a lot of wisdoms and multiple points with each. I'm going to have to go back and review those and reflect on my leadership skills. I think I've learned some things here as well. So I appreciate it.
Preparing for and participating in something like this forces you to rethink the things that are important to you. So it's been a learning experience for me as well. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Okay. Bye-bye.